John Avilla, welcome
Hey.
to the Personal Success Podcast.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's great to be with you. And we should have just started recording from the top. We were kind of sharing at the beginning how we had different musical journeys.
Yeah.
To get
Yeah.
my listeners sort of, anchored in here, who is John Avilla and what is Sound Union, the project you're working on right now?
Yeah, sure. And thanks. So I'm a lifelong creative professional, last 30 years in Silicon Valley in doing advertising, creative director, writer, copywriter, art director, creative director. Spent 30 years doing that and always had music on the side. And a few years ago now, it's about 7 or 8 years ago, I was at that point in my career where I'd done the agency thing, I'd done the in-house thing. And I was like, what's my last 15 years going to be? What's my big act? I always wanted to try and do something that would leave an impression, a positivity in the world, and threw together the idea of music. And like I said, I loved playing, always played music, but didn't really have a great experience in rehearsals. And I had friends who were great golfers or basketball players or swimmers. They had nice places to go to do all that. And me and my friends who were, somewhat accomplished at work would be in sort of dingy warehouses and ill-equipped places to do that in our spare time. So I said, you know what, why don't I build that kind of club that treats people who are rock stars at work like rock stars when they go after their music. And so that's what we've done with Sound Union. A private club. We've got many of these planned across the U.S. We're doing our first one here in Central on the Peninsula in the Bay Area, and it's an amazing community that has sprouted up in the last year around a cool facility. But it's creative centric, music centric. It's connectivity, and it is the coolest job I've ever had. That's for sure.
Researching this and kind of thinking about what you and I might talk about today. The way you framed it right there, when you said, my friends are golfers and they have places to play. And, you think about like a YMCA even, or, a
Sure.
pickleball court or a country club. There isn't that for music.
No.
And so just when you said that right there, I'm like, I get what it is. I get what it is.
Yeah.
And when you frame it like that, it makes a lot of sense.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, we worked a lot, long and hard to try and figure out really what is that immediate kind of hit. And it is, I'm in Silicon Valley, have been for my whole career. Things come into your consciousness, reading Walter Isaacson's book on Steve Jobs. And not that I want to, everybody who's a CEO says they want to be Steve Jobs. There's only one Steve Jobs, and I don't want to be. But I do like that approach of really simply build something you want. My partner and I have been business partners together for almost 19 years now, 19 years, almost 20. We both are students of Silicon Valley and some of the leaders and what are the lessons we could learn. And that one is the most clear, concise, and important one, right? Just build something you want. And that's where we started. And we're well on our way to doing that. It stopped being what I wanted solely a few years ago when we started getting members to join and listening to them. But, like I said, I wanted a cool place to go that wasn't cold in the winter and hot in the summer. And,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear you talking about sort of what we always talk about in the tagline of the show is redefining success on your terms. And we just talked for a few minutes before we started, but I had mentioned I had a musical journey early in life. I kind of, was in a band, spent some time traveling around playing. And you were like, yeah, I waited until later in life to do that. And you described a fear in doing that. So what was that fear all about?
Well, I had a great junior high school, college music experience. A lot of success built in. In my high school, we were a pretty competitive marching band. Yep, that's me, band geek. I was also a sports guy, but we were compete nationally. And a couple times in my 4 years in high school, we won the national championship for sort of drum corps style marching band stuff. So had that success, really enjoyed it, went on to play in college. But I had also had this half of my brain that was like, well, music is fun, but music is not a living. And being fearful about what kind of living am I going to have? And I had set a goal for myself to get a science degree and think about going to med school. And so that was in my mind. Well, I'm going to be scientific, I'm going to be analytical. Not really, the naivete of youth, not understanding that even that is creative right? And not about putting your creativity on a shelf to pursue this rational profession. And I do remember a moment in college. I was at UCLA, and I went to see Stanley Clarke play, and I'm a bass player. And I just saw him on stage. I'm not going to touch it again, which I did. I kept playing, but as a musician, right? You bump into these and you see these people who are like, oh my God, I'll never be that good. Not realizing it's not about that. It's about, pursuing your voice, pursuing your creativity. There's always phenomenal bass players out there in the world, Jesus Coombs, there's Michael League, there's, Stanley Clarke, et cetera. So it's not about that, but it took me a good, maybe 10 more years trying to pursue in a science. I did some research and definitely was not going to med school. That was just not for me. Did some exploration of, okay, what do I really like to do? And it actually had a friend in the science, and when I was doing research, he was a postdoctoral, or he was going after a doctorate in neuroscience, and had a horrible accident. And when he went from this absolutely brilliant neuroscientist who was really doing amazing work on epilepsy in the world, broke his neck, was in a vegetative state. And that was my kind of, oh my God, he's the same age as I was. And that was a little bit of a wake-up call of like, dude, what are you going to do? You're not going to become a doctor. You don't want to become a neuroscientist. You better figure out. I had just gotten married at the time, and I had to get my act together, really long-term view. Did some research, searching. Like, I like playing jazz. I like writing. I was in college, I also did improv comedy. So I like that creative, collaborative process, and found a lot of that in advertising. I mean, that just fits the bill. You're in a room, you're thinking, it's the yes and stuff, and it's like jazz. So I built a portfolio pretty quickly, got into some great jobs, had some really quick success there, went from staff writer up to creative director within a couple of years. This was in the first sort of .com, the 90s, so on the way to the first .com boom. And I felt again like, wow, this is coming easy. This is a good outlet for my creativity. Music came easy to me in junior high school, and college. And so I didn't, like I said, I kind of gave music up as a profession, wanted to do it as a pastime, but found a profession that had that same kind of creative energy, creative discipline. And actually my science background really helped me enter in there, because I was doing, technical products in Silicon Valley, consumer tech, as well as just strictly consumer stuff. So I was able to come in with this left-right brain kind of approach that really helped set my work apart. And that began a 30-year career in advertising and marketing that worked well for me. I mean, it was a lot of fun. I mean, advertising, your ups and downs, I mean, it's super stressful. You're always thinking. You learn that discipline of, I mean, you can't shut it off, right? I mean, so you learn how to balance life while all those gears are turning in the back. Actually, I don't know if my wife and kids would tell me I balanced life. I hope they would. I'm still married. I still have kids. That really, and then Silicon Valley, man, the first .com boom, watching all these ideas, just like, it didn't matter whether or not they died. And we have a really, I don't want to say accommodating, what is it? A really accepting environment here where certainly success is celebrated and even over-rotated, but I lost fear of failure. You just keep swinging, keep trying things. And you do that in advertising every day. You do that with working with startups. And so that was a pretty energizing, pretty inspiring time in that transition there.
Yeah, I hear you talk about just kind of the through line to everything from when you were in school through your career, was this sort of creative energy that was sort of propelling you. And I think it's interesting. I mentioned this before again, just a couple minutes that we talked, there was a lot there, John, just like the introduction here, but it was interesting because, there is, what I find is that, when we think about success, I love using this word success because I think of, I've got, $1,000 suit on, going out and I'm going to business, it's like, and as a verb, and
I know what you mean.
that's not it at all. It's actually like there is this sort of creative energy that sort of drives people. And I think that's really why we were drawn to Steve Jobs, because we'll see the creativity that came from, that was sort of emanated from him. And then it's kind of a mystery how we hear about he had these very kind of militant, ideas about how to do things. And I think we're kind of trying to connect the pieces there. But all that's for context to say that there's this creative energy that's kind of the through line through your whole experience here until you're kind of with Sound Union now. You're like locked into just creating a space for creativity for yourself, but for others too.
Yeah, others is super important. That is one discipline that you really learn in advertising and marketing, especially as a creative leader. I was super fortunate to have a mentor for a period who was name's Pat Duty, ran one of the best agencies in the world out of Seattle, Wong Duty. Super, just a mensch. And when I was leading a team of about 20 people, and he was kind of helping me navigate how do you do that and how do you succeed and serve clients and all this other stuff. And I remember every once in a while somebody will say something to you, right? And it just goes boom into long-term memory. And he noticed I was a little bit competitive. I mean, there's definitely, I have that competitive and the ego drive. And
Sure.
he's like, hey, dude, man, it's like you've done that already. Now you are leading a team, and your number one job is to create an environment where they can do the best work of their careers. And the light bulb, well, mind blown light bulb on going, all right, I think I can do that. I mean, I come from a large family. I'm a middle child, and I know how to kind of like navigate and keep people into it and motivated. And that really turbocharged my purpose at work away from my personal, seeing success in me winning the idea, me winning the copy. There's 100 ways to solve a problem. It doesn't have to be my way. And I brought that ever since he told me that, probably 2011, brought that to work every day. And now we do that here. I've translated that into a purpose for our team here of creating an environment where our members can make the best music of their lives. And our members they're like you and me. They've got day jobs. They pursue music as a hobby, as a passionate hobby. I call them prosumers, but they also do it because it's fun. It's re-energizing. It gets all those, neurohormones going, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. I mean, it feeds back, go back to my neuroscience background, right? Neuroplasticity. It helps with longevity, cognition, all this stuff. And this is why people pursue music and use that as a creative outlet, whether they're conscious of it or not. It's self-reinforcing behavior. So we just want to be the place where they love doing that the most, and they're doing the best music that they can. It's not the only place they play. A lot of my members have great studios at home, but they come here to play with other people. They come here to not have to lead a session, but can participate in a session. And I think that's something we bring to this idea of a club, that not only does the club not exist, but that ethos certainly doesn't exist for musicians out there anywhere else in the world.
No, I don't think so. So tell me what it's like. So let's pretend like we're going to Sound Union right now. And so what can you go there, and is the idea to play with other musicians, or is it to kind of showcase, individual talents? Is it all of the above? Is there recording capabilities? Like
Yeah.
what can you do there?
It is all of that. Let's call it a playground, right? For musicians that, like I said, you're going to walk in, our concierge is going to say, hi, Ryan, good to see you again. They'll help you reserve a room if you haven't already and you're coming in last minute. Everything is here for you. You can come in with nothing in your hands, nothing in your backpack, step into a studio and just explore your own music. In the evenings, we run sessions. We don't call them jam sessions because they're not completely freeform. They're curated. They'll have purpose. It's a genre of music, or, it's led by somebody to make sure everybody in the room, has a chance and gets that great experience, right? You can record. We have folks, every one of our studios and our main stage has a mixer that you can pop a card into or connect a computer to. Everything's lined in, so you can capture whatever you want. And we have a mastering room, a little DAW that you can go into and tweak stuff or create in the DAW even. And in between all of that is this community space that, we have a fridge that's always stocked, smiling people serving. And, you decompress after a session, or you kind of connect before a session and make those personal connections. I mean, music music is one of the most powerful ways non-verbally, right, that we connect. It goes way back to our ancient, I think, our ancient DNA. So when you come into Sound Union, part of that experience is building those relationships. It happens super fast over music. You can walk into a room of strangers and play music, and 3 hours later, you're hugging goodbye, going, when are we going to do this again? And I don't know
Yeah.
where else that can happen.
Yeah, John, in an article on the Sound Union blog I read, you note there's a striking number of business professionals and, STEM professionals. So science,
Yeah.
technology, engineering, mathematics. They moonlight as musicians. Why do you think the overlap exists there?
Well, there is some really good research. I mean, decades of research into music and kind of what its impact on life is. Music is one of those things too. If you have early success in music, it's a predictor of success later in life in something else, especially something technical.
Wow.
And I mean, if it weren't for being in Silicon Valley and having that anecdotal of my friends and connections here being in tech and white collar and all that stuff, but the research does kind of support this idea that it's that mathematical, it's the analytical, it's that left and right brain kind of coming together around music and then seeing people in these demanding jobs and demanding careers, whether it's just even solo entrepreneurs, or I've got members who are super accomplished in their own small businesses, so not necessarily tech or biotech, and they all have music as a foundation when they were younger. So there is a really good correlation there that's backed up by long-term research.
I was reminded of the power of music because it's so conscious altering. It just alters your consciousness, just like in the same way that exercise would, and, and even like drugs would in a way, right? It's almost like a drug itself. And I watched this, it was a goofy video on YouTube with my partner the other night. The number one songs from 1980 to 2020. We just sat there and watched the whole thing through. And Johnny had me messed up for like days. I was remembering stuff I didn't remember, I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot about that. It was, good, bad. It was all the things. And I just was like, music is sort of a powerful force, it's such a powerful force.
Yeah.
That, that literally was on my mind for about a week. I had this, I forgot about that song. That was 1988. How was that possible? It was so sort of stirring. It stirred up all kinds of emotional energy. And I guess I'm sort of indirectly asking, speak to the power of that and how it shows up in Sound Union here.
Yeah. And I think importantly too, especially for your listeners, is that it's not about always being the musician where you get that effect. Again, there's decades of research that says, here are the benefits of listening to music, whether or not you play, right? If you actively listen, passively listen, if you're dancing while you're listening, there really is those endorphins, the dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, these neurotransmitters are in a very real sense addictive. Your body craves those things. That's why you exercise. That's why you seek out joy and pleasure. Eating chocolate, will even trigger it, right?
Yeah.
So music, whether or not you're performing, listening, actively involved, like through dance, it's releasing those neurotransmitters. There are neuro linkages that happen that create long-term memories, like you said, that same effect. You don't have to be a musician to have watching that video that you were talking about. There's just, I think, our humans are hardwired. Music was probably the first communication platform that we had before language, right? So we're kind of built to have it become this, or have it be this communication medium. And I think having an environment we can dial that back up or embrace it, have more opportunities to do that. We have members who aren't musicians, they're social members, and they come to listen and be in an environment that's creative because they get similar benefits out of it as well, right? So I think that effect of having a place where we can remember that you can be creative, super safe. We spend a lot of energy making sure the space is safe. And I don't want to get over fluffy on it, but I have talked to everyone who's been pro touring musicians like yourself, who are, went on to a life of, a career, or even active musicians. Everybody fears going into a room for the first time and like, am I going
Yeah.
to be okay? Can I play? No matter the level, right? So creating an environment where we can remember, we're all born creative. We all love to draw when we're kids, and then that kind of, we love to sing, and it kind of gets suppressed, especially in adolescence, right? Where it's like, oh, your friends don't want to see you sing, or yeah, your drawing looks goofy. You get so it does kind of get suppressed. So we try to reignite that. I mean, I've got members who are 20 something. I've got members who are 70 something, men, women. We have the whole spectrum. And it's fun to see that there are people who earlier in their lives have learned, I don't have to suppress. And as a matter of fact, it's a superpower for me to recharge and be creative. To those who are like, man, I've spent the last 35 years slogging, doing what I do in Silicon Valley. Now this is my time. And they actually, it's a little, not sad, but I'm glad they're here, because it's never too late to plug in and re-energize that yourself, through creativity.
How do you sort of foster collaboration among the people who kind of come in there?
Another really good question that we do deliberately, right? So there's a few different ways. Session leaders, we've learned, we've done, even just in the last year, we're up to about 250 sessions that we've run, and we spend time with the session leaders, what works, what doesn't. So there is that in-room leadership, kind of like being a creative director, making sure it's a yes and environment, not a, hey, that's bad, stop environment, right? That using some of the classic creative brainstorming, improvisational rules that we know work out there. So we do it that way. The other way is not to overweigh it, but we do kind of select members, right? That, I mean, there's definitely people that come in that, and it's not very many. I would say maybe 1%, 0.5% that walk through the door on a tour, and you can tell they're not going to fit into the culture of being outward and being open-armed, and we all, it's hard not to judge, but we do try to foster an environment where it's a judgment-free zone. There's always somebody you can lift up, and there's always somebody that can lift you up.
Yeah.
So there is that cultural assessment that, all right, is this going to continue this great experiment that everybody enjoys being here? And inevitably, when someone is dissatisfied with something or an experience, we listen hard. We're again, that marketing background. What can we do better? We really want to be the favorite place for our members to play. So how do we do that? And as the community grows, we learn more and more, and even gain more facility on how to do that.
So what does the goal right now look like for the next step sort of for Sound Union here?
Yeah. We think we can build a bunch of these across the U.S. in very similar areas to the Silicon Valley, up and down the West Coast, throughout the Midwest. Cincinnati is one of the targets, Nashville, Austin, Chicago, Atlanta, New York, of course. So our dream is to get at least 5 of these up in the next 6 or 7 years, and have a community across the U.S. Is connected, whether or not they're physically together, but they're connected through this idea of what Sound Union is.
Yeah. Such an awesome idea.
Thanks, man.
How is your experience leading brands and marketing initiatives like companies at GoPro, Cisco, Charles Schwab? How are you taking sort of insights there and making them useful as you're sort of marketing Sound Union?
Yeah. Number one, motivation, right? I
Yeah.
spent a career going like, man, I'm building other people's brands. What kind of brand can I build? But in each of those companies, there were leaders that I got to work with in the C-suite that were way ahead of me in this journey of plugged into what their purpose in life is, plugged into how to rally other people with that purpose and create something that has impact. I mean, I really admire Nick Woodman at GoPro, Charles Schwab at Schwab. John Chambers was at Cisco at the time that I was working with them. And I've had others that I've worked directly with, that there is that consistency in those leaders who really excel, that had really, I think, good clarity of purpose. And I'll be honest, I mean, I don't think I really ever completely had it I started to get it like from that conversation with Pat, but I mean, that doesn't mean you have it all, boom, you're there and you're jamming. It took another 10 years, to really kind of understand, all right, what is it? What can I do that nobody else can do? What can I bring? And what tools do I have that will help me achieve those goals? So really working through those issues or challenges that come up, advertising is problem solving constantly, and working with others who have that same understanding and seeing how they problem solve. How do you encourage problem solving? How do you create an environment to do that? And seeing these CEOs who, that's really understand that on an absolute internal level and can get others to, that's how you scale, right? As you get bunches of people solving the problems, not just top down.
Yeah, I could be way off on this, but it's something that I'm sort of learning, and I'm sort of, I think there's different levels you learn things. And I sort of hear it echoed in what you're saying here. I'll do my best to try to explain this, but there's something about when you're clear on what your sort of purpose is, where you actually are just sort of facilitating others to find what their purpose is through an extension of yours. So, for example, here, there's this idea of creativity in music. And so you've got a place in a community where people are able to sort of work that out, right? And this tends to be an expression of your purpose, right? And so maybe there's a similar thing that's happening there with the gentleman you spoke of at GoPro, Cisco, and of course, Charles Schwab. I don't know, but there seems to be something there about, it sounds like a year ago, this was such a stale word to me, but facilitating, it just sounded like, but really you're just creating a space for people to explore as well. I don't know. Does that resonate anywhere?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you just nailed it of at least in this application of what I think I bring to the table, that notion of facilitating. I mean, I learned a lot of that as being a creative director in advertising, right? I mean, I like to say there's two kinds of creative leaders. There's the creative director who's like, hey, look, Ryan, cognizant of, there are 50 ways to solve this problem. Doesn't have to be the way I'm thinking. My job is to write a good brief, make sure the team understands, what tools and levers and strings they have to pull, and then see what kind of solution they come up with. So there's that director, and then there's the dictator, creative dictator. And I worked with a couple, and I didn't like it at all, where they come in and say, I need a red circle, and it's got to be this size, and just go freaking do it, right? No fun, not energizing. You don't get the best work. So that training of director, trying to be a good director, I'm not saying I'm the best or the perfect, but I aspire to be that kind of leader. That has spilled over here. And then it manifests when you can do that and allow people, create an environment where people can discover where their creativity will lead them. I mean, it manifests in little ways, like we can go into a session. We have a great session on Friday nights that's completely improvisational. It's my favorite one to listen to and favorite one to participate in. No chord charts, no nothing. The only plan is to just see what happens. And the drummer can start a groove and the rest of the room comes in with something. The keyboard player can start it. The bass player, anybody can start something and then see where the room is moved. And that happens in the moment, fires you up, and then it goes away. No one's writing songs in there. It's just, fun exploration. It's jazz. I mean, it is just dancing. And then there's the other kind of manifestation where we have a member who came in, joined about a year ago, never performed in public, liked playing guitar, didn't even have aspirations to kind of, all right, where am I going to go? And a year later, it's driving her. I mean, she's like, I'm going to retire in 3 or 4 years, and I know what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, and have fun doing that. So it has longer term, right, manifestations of what is this creative objective, or what's the creative why that we try to encourage.
I just want to put an exclamation point on what you just said there, because I had this experience where I went to it was like a yoga festival where everybody camped and whatever. And I remember everybody was so excited about the drum circle. And I was like, okay, the drum circle or whatever, and so, they're like, here's a drum. And something happened where, I can't really explain it, but that feeling where you're at a concert and everybody in there is singing every word. That is what it felt like to be in that drum circle. And it completely shocked me. I was like, I see why everybody's so excited about this. I mean, we were literally just like around a bonfire, and it was like, these loud kind of bongo like drums, right? And I was like, I did not expect that experience. It sounds like that's something like you're describing.
Yeah. I mean, that again, you had a place, permission, opportunity, and it was safe. And you had an experience that was a long lasting memory, right? And it helped that you're a musician, but you didn't have to be. I mean, drum circles, as an example, are often people who aren't musicians. But again, that leader, that curator is going, here's how we hit on the beat, and here's how we play together. And then all of a sudden, it is this communal thing. It is improv comedy. It is jazz music. It is all those immediately collaborative things that are available to us. And you've got a little bit of fear is reduced because you're in a group. So it's not like just I'm soloing. So it makes it easier and approachable. Yeah, we need more opportunities like that in our lives to remember that, yeah, we are creative, and you can make a fun noise and not have to worry about it,
Yeah, it's funny. It's almost not even about the noise. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, because we were just literally, it was drums. It wasn't like wasn't. I mean, everybody likes a good beat, right? But it wasn't like this beautiful orchestral music. It was.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting as you kind of, express what you've discovered your purpose is through your work that you're bringing about in life, right? What kind of you're forming this kind of David, you're kind of hammering out the marble, right? So you've got your work, and you're talking about this person. You brought up this example, which I didn't mean to gloss over here, but this person came in, had this experience of playing with everybody, and said, I know what I'm doing after this business thing. This seems to be in line. Like you've facilitated a place where people are able to discover something about themselves. So facilitated a place of discovery. I don't know. I'm just trying to put into a phrase, I guess, what this.
Yeah. Yeah. I think discovery, fostering curiosity, another manifestation. And this is a, work in progress. Like I said, every time you add somebody to the community, the community evolves a bit, right? So we listen very closely to what people want. And we have, like I said, members who they're picking up a mic for the first time in their lives, but they are passionate about, taking from singing in the shower to singing, with others, to guys and men and women who are in the industry. They're Grammy nominated producers, they're Grammy nominated engineers, gold record winning engineers who like to come here and play because it's their playground, right? So there's that curiosity of what could I do outside of whatever my normal life is. Fostering an environment where you can explore that and explore the curiosity. It's rooms that are full of instruments. It's rooms you can close the door and nobody can hear you, sing off key if that's what it is. And permission to follow those threads. I've got folks who, they had lyrics in a drawer for 20 years, didn't really know what to do with it. And they had a life event and they had the facility to have people play what was in their head. They weren't songwriters, but hey, I think it could go like this. And you have a collaboration session and music is recorded, music is created. And even that's transformative for this person who, anybody who writes a song for the first time, and has that, hey, wait a second, that was kind of fun. And it wasn't just in my head. It now became something else with other collaborators in the room that I hadn't even dreamed of, right? Having an environment to follow those curiosity, follow those threads of curiosity is really, it's fun. It's fun to not only create and do and see, but pretty energizing.
John, when you enter this sort of frame that you've created, what is it that you find in this kind of place where you can expand your creativity or express it? What's there for you?
That's a really good question. A vulnerable answer is a little bit of redemption. I had a startup in the first .com era. I mean, I was in a marketing agency. We had people coming in, and one of my account buddies and I were like, dude, if they can build a business off of that idea, we've got to be able to build a business, right? So we worked over a Thanksgiving or an Easter. It was an Easter weekend. Came up with a business idea, left that agency, raised $5.5 million, did a startup, and then the .com bubble burst and we were a .com. And so I had to wind that thing down. And that was a gut punch. I mean, I was like questioning everything it was a long 6 months, maybe longer. And I guess the point there is I always felt, man, if I had hung on a little longer, if I was better at convincing my partner we shouldn't fold, we had a plan to survive, just not be as grand. And if we had made it through a year and a half or so post that, I really think we would have had a good, solid business that would have lasted. I carried that regret. I still do kind of carry that regret. And then later, 10 plus years later, when I started formulating this idea, I was like, I think there's something there. And I did all the market research that a marketer would do that kept reinforcing that there's something to this idea. So walking in and seeing it happen, I do feel like, okay, there's a little bit of, you know what? I didn't just try once and then take the safe route. It's a pretty risky route to bail on everything from the job. I mean, this is not at all like, well, it is like advertising, but it's not pursuing a creative director job or a VP of marketing job or a CMO job. This is creating something, new, a whole cloth. So there's a huge amount of risk in that. And there's still, we're still creating, but I do feel like, okay, I kind of shedding some of that disappointment and not hanging on and working harder in the first.
It's funny. It seems to be like a lesson that resonates with me because I said I was in a band before, and looking back now, I was 25 years old and, didn't have a penny to my name, a bunch of great memories. I didn't know that was going to be the best time ever of my life, but I was like, you guys, we can't do this anymore. And I didn't do it. And I've got friends that are still doing it now. Yeah. I mean, they're in their mid 50s and they're touring 6 months out of the year and they have houses, in Dayton, Ohio here. And so
yeah.
Part of me looks back and I'm like, wow, if I just would have just stuck it out, we would have done something. I'm not saying we would have had, a radio hit, but we could have created, something sustainable.
Right.
And that really resonates with me, which what you're saying here. So there's kind of buried in that is that there's a certain resilience or perseverance, that's like, this is going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. Resilience is definitely, I would say, probably one of my strong suits. I learned it from those early, like that big accident with this brilliant researcher, and like, holy cow, I'm lucky. I wasn't in the car or anything but like, hey, I've been given some health. I've been given, a lot of good things, and I had a lot of early success in life, like I said, through music and academics. So I thought, oh man, life's easy. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, boom, hey, it can change in an instant. And then again, with the failure of a startup but luckily a bunch of things, having a partner, having a wife that kind of was not going to let me give up on anything, being in an environment business wise where your failures don't define you. It's what you do with your failures that define you. Right. And latitude to say, yeah, it didn't work, but here's what I learned. And here's what I can apply to this business now, or to your business when I was running an agency. You learn that you gotta, like I said, wasn't immediately resilient. Sometimes you're really kicked hard, but in the longer scheme of things, developing that muscle really, I mean, it's critical, I think, to a creative life, because you hear no, you hear stupid idea, you hear, even if it's your own mind, right? That you just gotta power through that stuff. Use some rational. So you don't want to follow a pipe dream. Resiliency doesn't mean following a pipe dream and hammering it until you're, at the very end. It means being analytical, being creative. There's always a solution. We'd always say this in the agency world. I'd always say it to clients. There's always an answer. Let's just find one that works the best that we can. But I don't know if we really ever have moments in our lives where you can't fix something or you can't solve. Everything's solvable to one degree or another, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you just have to wait for the answer to show itself, right?
Yeah.
So
keep powering until it does. Yeah, exactly.
So kind of a question about this sort of corner of the market, if you will, and that is, how do you see the future of of communities, whether it be music communities or just collaborative spaces in general? How is that evolving or becoming more relevant? Because I know, especially in my work, I have a coaching
Yep.
practice, and people really they want community. They
Yeah.
want community in a big way. So, there's a couple different bulbs that are going off for me, as I stated at the beginning. I've got a YMCA up the street where people go and they play racquetball together. Why isn't there a place where people can go play music together? That's like, oh yeah. And also, we've got this whole call out for community, right?
Hmm.
And so those seem to be connected. So what do you see there?
Yeah, I see that as one of the key trends that gave me the business reasons to do what we do at Sound Union. There's a lot of emotional reasons. There are cultural reasons, but you need a bunch of legs to the stool. There are definite trends that have lasted for at least 20 years on things like the experience economy. From a cup of coffee to private aviation and the whole kind of spectrum in between. People seek out some enhanced experience, right? And I don't mean just doing like the most popular coffee chains or anything like that. People choose to go to a local mom and pop shop because of a specific experience that they're creating, that they identify with. Like I said, all the way from that to, people spending their money on private aviation and aviation clubs like Wheels Up. There is that trend that we seek, and this is huge in the millennials and the Gen Zers, that I'd rather have an experience than a thing, right? So we definitely are drafting off of that, creating this elevated experience of your life with music. The other sort of, it's not a mega trend, but it's definitely a trend of sort of neo-tribalism. Ironically, with access through the web to any specific audience I want to get to, we want to find physically and be in physical proximity with people who have similar ideals, goals, the members of the tribe. In my case, it's a music tribe. I want to find somebody who likes to play the same things I play, who plays at the same level I do, because that connection with people, that only happens when you're in the same space is something that I think we are craving more than ever. And again, I think it's ironic because, we have access. We have access to people all over the world all the time, but it's not creating the community that, we all really kind of want to and aspire to. It in more ways creates division, right? So those two trends of that neo-tribalism and the experience economy are two really powerful things we try to include in what we do here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes a lot of sense. When the band sort of split up, my guitar player, he's like, well, I didn't think he was serious. He's like, I'm going to move to New York City. He still lives in New York City. And I was like, well, why do you want to go to New York City? We played there. It's crazy there, man. He's like, why? He's like, I want to go to a concert every night. And he's like, and if I want to play music, I want to be able to play every night. That's the experience that I want. And it's funny because the more I talk to you, the more I think about, wow, this is sort of what he went to New York City for. Right.
Mm.
And so he's been there for almost 20 years now. And this experience was what it was all about. He's like, I don't care if I end up being one of the guys who just plays on the side of the road that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I was really impressed with his clarity. I want that experience is what he wants. And he went and did it, and he's still sort of doing it. And I think, like you said, the generations that are sort of coming up, they want, a life experience. Right. And I think being able to kind of plug themselves into something like Sound Union, with the community there is definitely, who knows, you could say it's the way businesses will think about things in the future.
I hope there's an approach that includes that, right? I mean, and it's important to remember too, it's two ways. So it's not just the experiences that we want for ourselves, but what I see happening, saw it in in the creative agency world. I see it here where people do find purpose in creating an experience for others as well, right? Whether it's through writing a piece of music, performing a piece of music, or performing with others in their role in that room, creating cognizance of, hey, my role in this room to create is affecting other people, right? So it's not just about that one way pulling in, but that outward that out. Hey, my creativity can make a difference. I can create some ripples here. I love seeing that. I mean, that is, talk about energizing. We all, I hope we all, if we spend time thinking about it, want to use our creativity to, again, it's another Steve Jobs thing, right? What ripples am I creating in the universe? And, I mean, you can do that. You can do that all a bunch of different ways. And I'm just energized by seeing people do it through music.
I think that it's about connection, right? I think one of the things, probably the most rewarding thing for me about being a musician was I remember there's a couple stories that stick out. Somebody said that they had gotten this accident and rolled their car over, and the only thing they could remember was one of our songs playing on their stereo, right? And they just were like, focus on the song, right? And so this person wrote me this email or letter, or I can't remember which, describing this.
Yeah.
And then, just it connected us in some weird way. That experience became something relatable because of the context of music. And perhaps it was a little deeper. It was a song that I wrote or whatnot, but also, like I said, watching that YouTube video.
Yeah.
With my partner the other night, we were like, oh, what were you doing in 2002? And when this song came out, and it connected me with a part of my life that wasn't accessible without that.
The power that, I mean, we kind of, again, we glossed over that, but God, that connection to memory, to vitality. I mean, there's also research you talk about in retirement homes, or, where people near end of life and they're not super interactive, or I won't say they're vegetative, but when people hear music from their youth, boom, see the lights go on. They can remember the words. Man, I mean, that mysterious thread that just gets pulled right back out and takes you back to wherever you were when you heard that song, right? Or what those songs mean to you is undeniable and super addictive too, by the way. But really an example of the power, right? That creativity and art. I mean, it happens with images too. I think people would say the same thing about seeing certain paintings or what they reflect with movies, a scene out of a movie, the same kind of a thing, right? That, we try to foster.
Yeah. I think it's when I talk about music with people, it's like everybody has that sort of experience where they'll, it's unique to them sort of.
Yeah.
Like I remember my father growing up playing, I cannot remember who wrote this song, but it was, I believe in Father Christmas, like every Christmas. My dad's not a music guy. And he would be like, this is the only Christmas song I like. He put it on and like, that was it. You could celebrate Christmas for 5 minutes while the song was on, I was aware, even at a young age, that he was connecting with something. It was transporting him somewhere, and I was always, very curious about that. But everybody sort of, I've never met somebody, I guess we'll say it this way, that hasn't had that experience of just being deeply connected with some type of music. And even so, you mentioned art and things like that. And I think that might be true. I'm not sure how true it is for me. I think it's especially true with music for whatever reason.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think like you can, talk about things that like everybody respond to. If you just say, ba-dum, into something and people go, I know exactly what that is.
Right. Yeah.
And that's just, again, another example of just the power of how that is a medium of communication, right? And it can elicit imagery. It can elicit all sorts of memories that makes it a worthwhile thing to do, even if you're not going to, again, it's not about writing hit songs here. Just like people going to play pickleball is not about being the pickleball champion, or going to do pickup basketball on Wednesdays is not about getting into the NBA, or doing a nice round of golf is not about getting on the PGA Tour. It's valuable in the pursuit of itself as an art form, as a means of expression and communication. And I think that's one of the reasons music is so dang compelling. And it's a lifelong pursuit. It's not something really that people age out of,
Yeah. Yeah. How is technology changing the way that musicians connect and create?
Yeah, really good question. So there's a lot you can do on your own with a laptop. Again, go back 20 years when I was in the thick of an advertising career, and we would do videos. You'd walk into a room or do video production that had $1 million worth of equipment in it. I can do it on my laptop with a subscription to Adobe and a good camera, right? So There is technology that enables the individual to create everything from a sound to a composition. And what I also see, though, is technology makes it easier to collaborate across space and time. So the nonlinear sharing of files, and people write music that way all the time now. We're not quite at the latency levels to be able to have somebody in a studio in California, like a drummer in California and a bass player in New York, and then be able to lock in on a groove. You can do a lot with a guitar and vocals or something like that, right? The latencies aren't so important. But I think we will get there pretty quick. Even in the last few years, compression, decompression has gotten a lot better. So I think technology will allow that sort of global collaboration on a much easier level, and I hope simultaneous level coming through. Technology also helps you express things in much more, call them high fidelity ways. If I really want to find a sound for my instrument, I can do it. I don't have to have a million pedals to choose from, or a bunch of different amps, a tube amp or a solid state amp. People can find the sounds that they want because of digital tech and filters and all the other stuff. So I think it's opening up opportunities for in the best cases those individuals are seeing. It opens up opportunities for collaboration as well. Even in the rooms, technology gets used if, we've had sessions that are AI driven. It's like, all right, do an AI prompt, have it create some sort of song. And then we just kind of like use that as the creative clay to create something as a group that, is somewhat appealing, right? A few years back, I was working in-house at Avilla and was introduced to a French researcher. I don't recall his name right now, but this would have been 2018, 2019. And he had trained a deep learning model on, all the classics, on the Beatles, on U2, yada, yada. And the outputs, and back then they were pretty fundamentally bad, to be clear.
Sure. Yeah.
But it did make me think at the time, okay, well, if you take something classical and can pump out an AI generated classical score, how would humans interpret that? Because once again, if you don't necessarily take it from the standpoint, I'm going to read and play every note exactly, but you take that jazz approach or that improvisational approach to interpret what could happen. So I don't think we know yet exactly how AI can help us create music. I mean, it does a lot of creation on its own, and it's being used I love the funny stuff that pops up when people write absolutely silly songs. But I think it, again, like any kind of technology used in the right way, can enhance our creativity, not replace it. And we still have this thing called empathy that, quite a ways away, and interpretation and freedom to vary in playing something versus, specific interpretation based on what notes exactly are on the page, right? So I think there's a lot of potential with technology to enhance the collaboration, not replace it. Yeah.
As a lifelong musician and songwriter, there's an episode of the podcast on this. I just, on a whim, someone was like, oh, you have to check out Suno, this app or whatnot. And so I spent a lot of time, writing lyrics to a song and describing a genre of music that I like. And this is like literally the first time I was using it. What it spit out was like my favorite song that I could not stop listening to for like a couple of weeks. And I had like this moral conundrum. Like, what does this mean? This is not a human being that like wrote this. Like, how am I, there's even a lyric in there, which it put in there for me that said, I was a man. And I remember like, that was like, when he says that, that's like a high point in the song. That's like and I'm like, wait a second, that's ironic. What does this mean? And I really had to sort of I watched a whole bunch of YouTube videos on people's philosophy and things like that. And there's a big question about there. Again, I don't claim to understand this stuff deeply, but I'm not sure that there's anything out there that can actually be creative. It can mix and match what's already done. If you load it up in there, right? If you load all the classics in there, you can come up with a classical score that's going to be a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but actually creating something, I'm not sure that that's that's going to be possible with AI. And I thought that was something, because that meant that made me feel better, because what I was looking at, what I was experiencing, is I put in there everything I liked, and it just reflected it back to me. It was just a mirror.
Yeah. Well, I like Suno. I come at it with my comedy roots usually, and have fun with it that way. But again, I'll kind of rewind the clock a little bit with like advertising. The development of Photoshop, the development of InDesign and Illustrator really sped the creative process for not only illustrators and page layout people and photographers, but enabled others who weren't those disciplines. People like me rose up as a writer. You spend some time learning how to really work the program and learn how to use it to express what you have in your head. And it boosted creativity. It made creativity accessible to me as a guy who started out writing, to become an art director and know how to kind of push photos and create and indicate what I wanted. I think we say the same thing in movie making now. I mean, if you're a young movie, if you want a job in the movies, you want to graduate from NYU. My partner's son graduated last year in filmmaking from NYU, and he understands the power that if you can articulate much more clearly a storyboard, when you have an idea to pitch after writing a screenplay, you kind of reduce that ambiguity for others, right? And communicate what's in your head better, so that others who might fund this project have a better understanding of where you are going. And AI is a powerful tool to do that, to learn how to create those keyframes and the look that you want with, if you don't know how to, draw very well, so to speak. So I think like most things, yes, it's a tool. We need to learn to use it. I mean, I have a little bit of a conceit with the especially coming from my profession, is that I don't think I ever really created anything from, it's a remixing of things to be effective, right? Or things you want to evoke. So, yeah, I agree. AI is not going to create anything, because we're inputting ideas and architectures, and we're inputting the elements, the ingredients that come from our heads and experience, right? So I think we're a ways away from something whole cloth new ever being created, but we always have been. It's hard for humans to do that.
Yeah, there's sort of a like you said, I don't know if I read this somewhere, and I think you kind of alluded to it. I think before like language, there was music, there were sounds, the way we communicated. So what the function is of that is we kind of put our own little twist on it, right? It's our own little bird call with extra note here and there. And I think where there's proof of that is if you look at just sort of all the songs on the radio, right? No matter what the genre is, there's 5 or 6 different chord progressions that kind of make up all the songs, right? But there's immense amount of sort of creativity, I guess is the word, around that sort of structure.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say too, variation, right? Creativity is in and look, creativity comes from constraint too, because whatever those progressions are, they resonate. Artists are looking for ways to use what resonates. I just had this conversation with my 16-year-old the other day, that she's listening to the Stones. She's listening to, Aretha Franklin, stuff from the 70s, the 60s.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? When I was your age, I would have been listening to stuff like ragtime from the 1920s.
Yeah.
I think something evolved, something happened, starting around the 60s, that music found, these elements that are really like they just will last, right? The progressions that last, the themes. So there was, I think, a real renaissance that we're still, so it's not just us who grew up with that stuff. It is this younger generation. She finds it. It's not like I sit down and say, I'm going to show you the Stones. These guys are important because of X, Y, and Z, or the Beatles because of that. Generation is, it's getting remixed. It's getting pulled into their feeds and their consciousness. And they're like, yeah, this is pretty cool. Right. And I'm like, yeah, it still is.
Yeah. I'll see, when I was growing up, there was, we didn't have the internet. It was Nirvana.
Yeah.
I was like 13 11, 12, 13, somewhere around there. And I remember the only way you could get concert t-shirts, because I wasn't going to a concert at 11, was the back of like Hit Parader magazine, right? So I would try to order that Nirvana shirt that literally I think they sell at Walmart now. It's just the smiley face that says Nirvana on it. And they would always send my money back and be like, I'm sorry, that's out of stock. And I see it everywhere now. I'm like, but you were born, 20 years after Nirvana disbanded. So what are you doing? So
well, there's that indication too of that image that pulls back memories, right? There's an example of the art. Andy Warhol, pop art, does the same kind of a thing, right? So I mean, I don't know what it is that it's that sense of nostalgia, but also sense of a little bit of, I think, the teens going, I'm tuned in. It's a little bit of that self-branding thing that allows them to show cool. Yeah.
So John, what haven't I asked you that you thought maybe I would, or you wanted to mention on the show today?
I love the broad stroke of how we find our creative through line, and sometimes we fight it or don't take the time to spend the time to recognize what it is. But I wish for people I meet every day, people listening to the podcast, that it's a worthy exercise to, whether it's over a cup of coffee, sitting on, somewhere quiet or whatever in the library, to go, what's going to be my creative through line, or what am I not listening to that if I had the courage to start following, where would that lead? Where would that lead me? And how do I follow that to, again, I hope everyone has a bit of a mission to create a positive ripple in the universe. And how do you use your creativity and what unique talents you have? Everyone's got something unique.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was listening to you, I was thinking about, in my life now, I think what creativity has become is sort of synthesis, right? Where before I would, try to synthesize a song right out of emotional artifacts and pop music that I heard and whatnot, and be like, yeah, this is my, emotional statement. Now you try to do that with your work. It's like I'm taking, this podcast is really talking about, what does it mean to be successful as like a human being, right? And one thing that's really clear and echoes through a lot of the different episodes is how important it is to create, to express creative energy. And not just in art, right? But I think there's a certain creativity, like I said, to synthesis, and you could take that to a business or whatnot.
Yeah. You can take it to parenting, right? You can take it to interpersonal relationships. Again, not that any one of us is phenomenal at all of those things, but I hope people recognize or take the time to find that creativity can answer and help you get to, help you get over the small barriers, the big barriers. Everyone's got bumps in their life. Everyone's got failures. I've been fired more times than I've been hired. Well, actually, that's not exactly true. But I mean, like it feels like it. Yeah, you get fired once or twice, and it feels like, you're always fired. But it takes to know that there's something in us all that kind of pull that back out and apply it. There's a lot you can do. I try to help my kids understand that, especially those who are younger adults now, that there's always a creative solution out there, man.
John, I've really enjoyed this conversation today.
I have too, Ryan. Thanks a lot, man.
Appreciate your time. I love this idea. And I really wish you the best.
Thank you. I really appreciate the chance to not only talk about Sound Union, but the creative journey that got us here.
All right. Good luck to you.
All right. Thank you, man. You too.